Let's continue from part one about the home buying process. So we've talked about all the different steps that need to occur up until you and the seller reach an agreement. And then we briefly went over the escrow process and basically said it was 30 days. But let's talk further about what happens inside of that escrow process. So inside of these 30 days, there's a lot of steps that happen, and it depends on the days and when it begins and how long these days are. So we're going to talk about each one block by block so that you can get a full understanding of what's really happening behind the scenes. Now remember, this looks chaotic, but your realtor takes care of all of this. Your lender facilitates all of this. So you have to be involved in a couple of decision-making processes, but the actual steps are being handled by your advisors. All right, so let's start with the next step, really the first step of the escrow process, which is earnest money. So everything on this is going to start from the time that you accept an offer, you and the seller reach an agreement, okay? Earnest money. So earnest money, and this changes, right? Depending on your markets, depending on times, contracts change all the time, what is customary dates. So this is current as of the date of this video, but sometimes these can change, okay? Every contract is different, but the milestones are generally the same. So in our local contracts right now, earnest money. So earnest money is what you give to escrow that symbolizes to the seller that you're a serious buyer, that you are investing in this process. Typically, it's anywhere from $1,000. I've seen customarily 1% of the purchase price. In today's times, that's how most of the offers are being written, 1% of the purchase price. It shows that you're a serious buyer. Now, if you have 100% financing programs like a veterans loan or a USDA loan, typically 1% of the purchase price is not customary. About $1,000 is what I've generally seen as a seller as being acceptable when you do 100% financing. But if you're doing, say, 3.5% down or 5% or 20% down, what we've learned, about 1% of the purchase price. So if you buy a $600,000 house, plan on the earnest money being about $6,000. It's a very winning strategy when negotiating. Now, here's the part that gets confusing to a lot of people. It's not in addition to. This is not extra money. Think of this as part of your down payment. So you're giving part of your down payment in the beginning through earnest money, and then you're going to give the rest of your down payment at the end. Now, remember, contracts have lots of contingencies, so this is a refundable earnest money deposit so long as you cancel under the contingencies that both you and the seller agreed upon. So I know that can be a little scary writing that big check, but remember, it is part of your down payment. And also remember, you can get that refunded to you under your contingencies that both you and the seller agree on. So you have about 2 days. Customarily right now we have 2 days, and that is banking days, to deposit your earnest money. Next milestone are your loan terms. Now, this is a negotiable item. Customarily, we see about 10 days from the time that you accept your offer. And notice this is an overlap. So this is not like one thing and then the other. In the start of your contract, a lot of things do happen at once. So the next step is going to be you lock your loan rate. So remember how mortgage rates work. They change day by day. I think they even change, over time throughout the day. And depending on how the market is doing, your lender is going to want to commit your loan rate for the entire purchasing process right away. Maybe they're going to want to wait because they think the rates are going to go down. So this is a very fluid thing, but basically in a contract, you do have a certain amount of days. Customarily, I've seen 5 days, I've seen 7 days. We typically negotiate 10 days so that you and your lender can chat and decide when is best for you to commit to a loan rate. Once you lock that loan rate, that's the rate you're going to have for the entire term of your loan. Now, also what's happening at that same time is your lender is going to order an appraisal. Sometimes they call it an inspection, which can be really confusing because your agent will be coordinating inspections and your bank will be coordinating inspections. So how we determine the difference and explain the difference to our clients in the business is we use appraisal when we're talking about the bank, and we use inspections when we're talking about buyers learning about the condition of their home. But you may accidentally get this confused because sometimes you will hear lenders calling this an inspection. Don't differentiate them. They're very, very different things. So how long does it typically take? 21 days is pretty customary for a negotiation. Now, again, it's a negotiable item. There is no set amount of days, but these are the things that we're seeing on our sales team that sellers are agreeable to. I have seen 28 days, but typically about 3 weeks if you're not in a crazy marketplace where there's tons of bank activity going on is plenty of time to have an appraisal completed. Now, in hotter markets, like when we had interest rates crazy low, Banks are also busy doing refinances out there, and it was really tough for us to get an appraiser in 3 weeks. So this is a fluid thing. It is very market specific, and your agent will know what is a winning strategy under the current marketplace. The time of this video, pretty customary timeline, about 21 days. Now that is maximum. We've seen appraisers go out the next day. It can happen very, very quickly, but up to 21 days, your lender is going to have an appraiser completed on the property. Now, an appraiser is not something you have to attend. Sometimes agents will attend them, sometimes they don't. But this is something that is not what you attend, because remember, the appraiser works for the bank. So this is something different than the inspections. About 21 days into the process, and do notice that it does overlap all the other steps. It's not a sequential thing. This is all happening at the same time. Next that happens is the loan review process. So this is not a review of the house. That's what the appraiser does. This is the review of you. This is the completion of the bank agreeing to loan you money. And it does take time. And there are a couple of rounds of this. So we call this the underwriting process, where you first meet your lender. We talked about that in the last video when. And they do a preliminary review of those documents. It is very uncommon that that's enough, that that's all they need and they're good and they approve you for the loan. It is really, really common that it comes back out of underwriting to the lender and they need more information about your finances. That can be explanations on a bank statement. That can be an additional paycheck stub, or it can be a clarification on something. A letter of explanations are really normal. If you're self-employed, they want more information about your business. This is very, very normal to have multiple rounds of underwriting. So basically, the paperwork goes to the underwriter reviews it, and it goes back to the lender and says, thanks, but I want this, this, and this. And then you give it to them, and then it goes back to the underwriter. So it's this back and forth process. Sometimes buyers can get really frustrated with that, but it's important to understand it's really normal in the process. Again, we talked about this last video. It's not like getting a car loan or a credit card. It is far more complex, because remember, they're making a 30-year commitment to you. So they want to make double sure that you can pay them back. So these rounds of underwriting is very normal, and it does take time. Now on this form, I said 25 days because we're seeing that right now in this marketplace. Sometimes we go to 28 days. I've heard some agents negotiate 30 days. It just depends. But what we've learned is sellers do like to see you completely approved for the loan, give or take about a week before close. I know that when I'm negotiating contracts for my listing clients, I typically issue back counter offers if I see that they want to complete the sale in 35 days, but they also want to be completed for the loan in 35 days. Feel it's appropriate that the lender should finish up their job before closing so that the selling clients have some assurance that everything is okay. Okay, what's next? So all those steps previously, they're all happening at the same time, facilitated by your agent, facilitated by your lender. So the next step is, let's say you're buying a home in a homeowners association, a property owners association. From a real estate standpoint, we treat them as one and the same. The associations kind of think of themselves differently, but the process really doesn't matter. It's all the same. So if you purchase a home that has a set of rules, whether it be a condominium, a neighborhood, and so forth, there are rules that you have the rights to approve or deny. So these pop up later in the process. It will pop up in parallel to the other steps going on. So there are a lot of things happening at once. These set of rules don't show up right away. And the reason is because the seller actually has to purchase them for you. So these aren't prepared for your review when you're negotiating the offer. You basically are negotiating the offer under the pretense that you're generally going to be okay with the HOA documents, subject to your thorough review. So you're not going to know all the rules of the HOA until you go into contract, and this is for Northern Nevada. Other markets might be different, but this is customary for our Northern Nevada marketplace. So you go to accept an offer, you're performing other steps in the loan process and the purchasing process. The seller is going to write a check to the HOA to provide you what's called a resale package. That is going to be a big, huge, thick document of every single detail that exists in the HOA. It'll tell you if they're financially strong. It will tell you if there's lawsuits against them. That happens a lot sometimes, where maybe a contractor that the HOA hired, they got mad at each other and there's some kind of a litigation over it. It's a really common thing that happens. Maybe somebody, if you have a condominium, a contractor fixed a roof and did a poor job and refuses to fix it, so the HOA sues them to get it fixed. This kind of things come up all the time. Retaining walls, flood control, all these random things come up where the HOAs decide it's in the neighborhood's best interest to file litigation against these people. So you will see those type of things. Sometimes a litigation is no problem, doesn't affect the purchase. Sometimes a litigation can be so profound that it actually makes the property unfinanceable and the lender will decline the loan. So there's all kinds of variations on these. I will say for the majority of HOAs, if there is litigation, I haven't really seen it affect the borrower or the buyer. So then the lender says it's okay, it's the HOA's problem. That's why you pay their fee so that they can deal with it. So it's not that common to see major issues in an HOA. Now, when does this show up? About 14 days. So from the time we're doing all the other steps we just previously talked about, it takes about 2 weeks for these rules to come in, unless the seller chose to purchase them a little earlier, okay? We say 14 days because typically it's about 10 business days. On a calendar, it translates to about 2 weeks. Now, if there's holidays, things like that, then it gets added on and it would actually be longer than 14 days. Like if we do business in between Christmas and New Year's, there's a lot of closures during that time. So HOA documents can take longer, but customarily in a normal non-holiday marketplace, about 2 weeks. Now, once you get those documents, they're typically emailed to you in a digital format. That is acknowledgement of receipt once you get them and open up that email. Nevada law says you have 5 days to read those. So as an agent, we're very particular about this 5-day window to make sure you don't have any questions, because it's really important to understand as soon as day 6 hits, even if you don't say a word, it is deemed that you accept the rules of the neighborhood. Now, if you're used to buying in HOAs, there's not very many HOAs that have crazy special rules. One of the most common things that I see where a buyer will not want to carry forward is maybe there's a pet restriction or an RV restriction, those type of things. We do see that often where a buyer thinks that maybe an RV is allowed and then they learn otherwise, they choose not to carry forward, or they're in a condominium and the seller thought that a certain type of pet was allowed, then the HOA rules say otherwise. That's another reason. Airbnbs are really popular right now. A lot of HOAs have been pushing them out by putting restrictions on how the properties can be rented. A really easy way to restrict vacation rentals is putting rules in that say you have to rent the property for at least 30-day leases. So you're not allowed to do any terms less than 30 days. A lot of times investors will look at that and go, oh, I thought I could use this as a vacation rental. They say, no, I cancel. So as long as you do it in 5 days, it is something that you can cancel. It's a customary contingency. It's Nevada law, and you can have your earnest money returned to you. So that's going to be the next step, is the review of the HOA documents. The next milestone, again, also Nevada law, is the title report. So title reports can look really complex, especially if you're not buying and selling real estate a lot. These are really goofy documents because they're so large. So basically how this works is from the time that the seller accepts an offer, a title report is ordered. Now sometimes the listing agent will get that done a little sooner, to where you might see it right when you accept an offer. You might see it the next day. But if the seller and title company do not order a title report until the day that you go into contract, we see that it takes about 7 days. Once you get that report, very similar to the HOA documents, you have 5 days to complete review. And just like HOA documents, if you say nothing, then it is understood that you have accepted the terms of the title report. Let's dive into a title report a little bit and show you some of the things to look for and some of the resources and tools that today's title reports have. So this is an excerpt from a title report on one of our recent transactions. None of this is secret. All of this is public record. So there is nothing confidential in here. This is all with homework can be done. It's all on public record. The nice part about a title report is they do all this homework for you and put all publicly filed items nice and neat on one report and helps you understand your property. Further, your lender is going to review this thoroughly as well. So if your lender approves the title report for your loan, then everything is generally okay for the process. If they are willing to loan the money, then the title is deemed clear. Now, there are some things that are of concern to buyers, and we can talk about where to find those in the reports. Now, loans and liens and things like that, where the seller owes money, those things aren't of concern. The title company will review the numbers, make sure that all of those can be paid off in full before they'll even sell you the property and issue an insurance policy. Remember, the purpose of this report is to give you an insurance policy called title insurance. What is title insurance? It gives you insured ownership of the land so that there are nobody that can take the property from you. There is nobody that can say that you owe money. You own the property and say, oh no, you owe me money because of something that happened 10 years ago. That's the purpose of title insurance. Their job is to make sure that from the day that you close, there is nothing that anybody can come after you on regarding the land. That's their job. Now let's jump into some of the things that can be concern to a buyer, where even the lender is okay with everything and the title company is okay with everything, but maybe there's some issues that you have concerns over. Now, before we used to have to get additional documents if buyers had concerns. Now it's really fun in today's title reports. It's all embedded in the document where you can just click on the link and learn more. So if you can see, basically I pulled out items unique to the property. So really the parts to pay close attention to is what's called exemptions. Those are the things that are unique to this property and this property alone. And every property that exists in Northern Nevada has some level of exemptions because that makes it unique to the property. So on this one, you can notice at the bottom, it's actually page 5 of 8 is where the exemptions begin. But these are the things you want to pay close attention to because that's what makes it unique. Now, when you jump to page 6, this is what's fun about today's title reports. See how there's words in blue. Those are links. Those are links that actually connect to the exact document that pertains to the property. So easements is a really big one. So let's say that you had a plan to build a shop in the back of your backyard, but then you review this title report and you learn that there's an easement that's owned by the power company for power poles or something like that. And now all of a sudden where you wanted your shop, somebody else has rights to the land and you're not allowed to build a shop. So there are things that can occur where you have goals on changing your property and the restrictions that are filed against it don't allow you to do what you want to do. Or maybe you learned that there's a road going right through your pasture that you were planning on building a horse arena, something like that. So it's really important to pay attention to these blue links. And I actually pulled some of them up here just so you can kind of see. So I clicked on the easement. So if you look on my document, it's item 16. It talks about easements and other matters set forth in division of land map number 48. When you click on land map number 48, it pulls this up. So you can see how this is actually a really old document. It was actually drawn by hand. So this is everything that's recorded on the property from the beginning of the state, from the beginning of written record. So I've seen things back in the 1800s. I've seen things that are so old and so obsolete that you can barely read them, but it's the best copy that exists. So some of these things aren't quite enforceable. Some things actually are illegal, but since it's recorded, it's there forever. So not everything is to be taken seriously. There are, sometimes there's rules prior to the Civil Rights Act that you will see things on there that are completely illegal, but they still exist. So it's important to understand that it's all based around current law, even though there's things recorded from your property in the turn of the century, 1800s, those type of things. It's always pertaining to current law. But these are, what's nice is you can see the easements on your properties. So this property here has easements about roads and drainage ditches and things like that. It's important you understand those type of things. Now your agent can do a brief over as well with you, just pointing out where things are. Now in terms of legal advice, title company can't do that, your agent can't do that, your lender can't do that. If you have any legal questions pertaining to what's filed against your property, you have to talk to an attorney because we're not skilled to advise in those type of things. We're only skilled to show where easements are, but in terms of the legal ramifications or how you can challenge something, we're not skilled in that, nor is your title officer. You do have to consult with an attorney. You have 5 days to review all of this. Most of our clients really only take about a day. They're not planning on making crazy changes. The lender's happy with the title report. They like the property the way it sits. They're not planning on any crazy changes. So they're happy and pleased with the property. But some of these, I've had people cancel over these. There's actually a place in Carson City, for example, that has a smell easement. That's financeable. That is, you can get title insurance on that, but basically there's a set of properties that are close to a sewage plant. And when that sewage plant was built, they compensated a previous owner to file an easement on their property that says you can't bother us if you smell an odor. And we've had people cancel over these smell easements. So don't brush over these title reports, folks, because there is a lot of important things in there, and you should thoroughly review the exemptions section of your title report. Then if you have further questions about the other documents, of course, consult with an attorney. Now, after the title report comes in, remember there's other things happening in parallel. And this is next one of the biggest milestones of the purchase contract, and arguably one of the biggest reasons deals fall apart. And that is inspections. So in Northern Nevada, unlike many marketplaces, sellers don't do inspections here. It's extremely uncommon for a seller to understand the full condition of their home and make repairs on their home. Some of our nearby markets, really common. A lot of it has to do with the average purchase prices and how much higher they are. They have the abilities to invest in their home and make sure everything is fixed that's discovered on a home inspection. Here, that's not the case. Here, traditionally, a seller will fill out a disclosure form to the best of their knowledge, but if they've lived in the house for 10 years, a lot of times they don't know what's wrong with their house. They'll provide that to you, and that's all they know. They have not hired any professional inspectors to give them an understanding of the condition of their home prior to listing their home for sale. So that's really unique for our area. A lot of markets, the sellers will do all inspections prior to even marketing their home for sale, and often fix everything prior to putting their home up for sale. Not the case in Northern Nevada. So we go into every single purchase contract not understanding a home's condition. So a buyer has this time to educate themselves. It is traditionally a buyer's expense. Unless you're a veteran, then often the pest inspection is covered if you didn't ask for any credit towards your closing costs. But traditionally, as a blanket statement in Northern Nevada, it is a buyer's expense. So this is their chance now to learn about the home. Now, depending on the type of the home, customary, like if you're in a neighborhood with city utilities, a customary timeline is about 14 days. Sometimes if you're on rural property where you have wells and septic tanks and things like that, I have seen them successfully go to 21 days. But the general accepted timeline is going to be 14 days from the time that you accept your offer. Now, your agent's going to hit the ground running on this. Day one that an offer is accepted, a productive agent will be scheduling inspections right away. It is really common on our sales team that we can get inspections done as quick as 7 days because of the resources and aggressively scheduling all of the appointments. But generally about 14 days is very normal. Now, this is your chance to learn about the home. A home inspection, maybe a sewer line inspection, a pest inspection. Radon is very prominent in Northern Nevada. So all of our homes, we recommend our clients get a radon inspection. They don't come up positive a lot, but it's still important to understand that radon is prevalent here. That's why we have geothermal power plants, is because we have those type of things happening in Northern Nevada. What else? If you have rural utilities, so getting the well tested, how much water does it produce? What's the quality of the water, and are there any filters needed to remedy that quality? How is the septic tank? Is the leach field okay? So there's a lot of things that can happen in these 14 days for you to educate yourself on your home. Now, these things do take some time, and they can get expensive. So it is really common that not all buyers will order every single inspection that exists, because these are each one hundreds of dollars. And if people are limited on their resources to purchase a home, a lot of the folks don't have the resources to spend $2,000 on inspections. So typically what we say for a rough budget on inspections on homes with city utilities, like in a neighborhood, anywhere from $500 to $600 is a pretty typical range of what people are spending on inspections. Now, rural properties are very different. Well and septic inspections are very expensive. So it can be upwards of $1,500 to $2,000. Now, in a balanced marketplace, sometimes a little bit of that can be offset by the seller. So for a septic tank, for example, there's two things. There's a septic inspection and a septic pumping, where the pumping is where they empty out the entire tank. In a balanced marketplace, a lot of times seller will agree to pump out their own tank so that you, the buyer, can inspect it. That can save a buyer about $600 in upfront closing costs. So it just depends on the marketplace. In a really hot market, buyers were always pumping the tanks to stay competitive and write competitive offers. So it really just depends on the market and what is trending at that time. But rural properties, about $1,500 to $2,000 is a reasonable budget for inspecting the home. City properties, I've seen about $500 to $600 is a pretty customary range of what to expect when paying for inspections. Now, this is your chance to decide if you approve or disapprove the home's condition. So basically you have up until those days. So let's talk about 14 days. You have up until 14 days to decide. So not to be misunderstood with having 14 days to do all inspections, then you have some thinking about it time. You have to be done thinking about it by your deadline. So 14 days, we want to have inspections done in say 10, so that you have about 4 days to sleep on it, think about it, and make sure you're comfortable with the condition of the home. This is also where if you want the seller to fix anything, this is your opportunity to ask. It's on a form called a Notice of Required Repairs. So let's say you take the entire time to decide the home's condition, all 14 days. By day 14, so this is not after 14 days, it's on 14 days, you get to ask the seller if you want anything fixed. And this is an open-ended conversation. Of course, if you overshoot it, the seller's going to say no, and they're going to cancel. But we're also wanting to make sure we don't undershoot it to where you have concerns about the home's condition. There is kind of a little Goldilocks space, if you will, where there's enough to where the seller will agree, but you're also happy with the condition. Are they going to fix every single little thing? In our experience, no. Regular maintenance items, things like that, they don't fix. And actually in the contracts, especially the new Northern Nevada contracts, there is discussion about that to where maintenance is really not deemed a repair. This is things that are actually broken. So it doesn't mean you have the right to, you still have the right to approve your home's condition. But these are things, broken water heaters, broken furnaces that aren't operating properly, roof issues, window issues. So really substantial things we recommend that we see if the seller will pay for. Now, depending on how you wrote your offer, if you wrote your offer in a discount because of condition, that's a totally different conversation. We're really talking about top dollar offers. Homes that are, in good condition, competitive homes, things such as that. Now, in terms of asking for every single thing, that's, like I said, when things can get hard. A lot of times sellers will disagree to that. It just depends on the circumstances. But remember, every single report that you're going to get on here, there's going to be stuff wrong. It is an inspector's job to find things wrong. And never in my career has anybody ever said a home is perfect, ever. I'm talking about brand new homes as well. They will find 80 pages of things wrong on your home. So these are sometimes a punch list of things to do when you own the home. But if it's really important or really costly, that's really when we step forward and say, seller, I like your home, but I like it subject to you fixing these things. And sellers are reasonable. It's not fun to go back on the market. And a lot of times the things that you're concerned about, every buyer is going to be concerned about. So give those considerations as a part of your inspection contingency. So the next step after you and the seller reach an agreement on repairs, the seller has quite a bit of time to complete those repairs. And it's depending on how you negotiate the contract. Now, customarily for us, we basically ask that the seller complete any repair requests that you both mutually agree on within about 5 to 7 days prior to the close of escrow. So in this example, we did 5 days. So basically, everything should be done by then. That gives you time to look at everything. If you have any questions or concerns, it gives some time to remedy those things. That's why you don't want to push it to the wire, because if you have moving trucks packed and you still haven't even approved the seller's inspections, we have an issue, because you could be put in a corner to where you have to agree to move, or now we're delayed because you don't agree. So you want to give yourself some cushion on approving those type of inspections. 7 days, 5 days, it just depends on the timeline of the contract. This example, we did 5 days, but it is a negotiable item. So that happens basically right near the end of the contract. So you can see that's why the bar is all the way to the right there, because it's on the home stretch, but it's also a part of the contract. So this is where you walk through the home. Sometimes buyers will not hire anybody else, but just walk through the home and approve the conditions. Sometimes they'll rely on invoices. So like if you had a plumbing request and you got an invoice from a licensed plumber, sometimes that will suffice and there is no inspections done and that invoice satisfies the buying client. So it just depends on the type of repair and what kind of documentation is provided is what satisfies our buying clients with the repairs that sellers do. Now, if you notice, everything's starting to get to the right. We're on the home stretch of the purchasing process. So at the very end of the loan review is when the lender's done. And that's what we call loan documents are coming in. So you might hear a lot of times with your agent saying, well, we're waiting for loan docs. We're waiting for loan docs. When are loan docs going to be in? Really common term near the home stretch. That's because agents know that when loan docs are in, it's done. Your review is finished. They will not issue loan documents to the title company where you would sign the paperwork until they're fully reviewed with their loan. So we know that's a milestone. When a lender tells us that loan documents are on the way, that's a validating milestone for us to understand that there is no more review. You're all finished up in the loan process. Once those loan documents are in, that's when the signing begins. So it's about 1 day. Takes about an hour of your time, depending on the questions that you have. I've seen as quick as 45 minutes. I've seen upwards of 2 hours. It really just depends on the questions you have in the signing process. Do expect to take off some time off of work. Title companies work very similar to bank hours. They're 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Occasionally, title officer will be available after work, but this is not like a 24/7 signing availability unless you choose to use a mobile notary who comes to your home. That is an option that's available to you. But if you want to go to the title office, sign paperwork, do expect to take a little bit of time off because title companies do work professional banking style hours. Final step in the purchasing process, final walkthrough. So this is where you get to go back to the home and just make sure everything looks okay. This is not like doing an entire inspection or anything like that. It's just to make sure that the home is of of the same condition as when you did your inspections. I said similar, but it's the same. I've had problems on these, and that's why they're very important to do. I've walked into houses in final walkthrough where there's a broken furnace. I've walked into homes where on final walkthrough, water's pouring out of the garage because the water heater failed. I've also walked into a home in final walkthrough where water was coming out of the ceiling because of a broken pipe. So these are very important milestones. A lot of times they're treated very lightly, but it's really important to understand that this is your last chance to be okay with your purchase. This is the one that says, I'm okay to take the keys. I'm okay to take possession of the property. So there's a level of responsibility from the buyer to be okay with that. So feel free to walk around, open cabinet drawers, make sure there's no leaks happening that weren't there before, because the seller is obligated to maintain their home during the escrow process. It's called systems and maintenance. So when a water heater breaks and the heater was fine during the inspections, that is something that the seller is obligated to remedy to uphold their end of the contract. Same with a furnace, those type of things, broken pipes, those type of things. Now, if something's catastrophic, like my example about broken pipes falling through the ceiling, that was a little different because it was an HOA, so the buyer understood the HOA was going to fix it. But let's say it's a homeowner and you walk over to a final walkthrough and a tree fell across the house. You're not going to close, right? So there's going to be delays in processes such as that. Now, a lot of times what happens is there's insurance claims involved. So we have to hit pause in the process. Insurance companies come, insurance claims are filed to remedy the home, and then once it's fixed, then it's carried forward with closing. I haven't really seen a final walkthrough cancel a deal, but I've definitely seen final walkthroughs delay deals. Now, after you approve the final walkthrough, that's it. You get the keys. Now, a lot of times final walkthroughs and loan signings do happen on the same day. The example I said showed that you sign on one day and final walkthrough the next, but it's actually really common that you'll do the final walkthrough right before you're signing, or you might sign and then do the final walkthrough right after. Remember when you sign in a title company, because Nevada's an escrow state, it's not like there's no turning back. They have to get permission from the agent side to release this process and complete the process. So even though paperwork is signed a week before, sometimes they're signed early, don't think that there's no turning back. Nevada is an escrow state, so realtors still can enforce their contingencies and say, don't close until you hear from me. We do this type of stuff all the time, especially on issues with final walkthroughs, things like that. So lots of processes happen between that 30-day window. And really your agent's job is covering all of this. And that's really the power of an agent. That's why we have jobs, because there's so much going on behind the scenes. It is really tough for a buyer who only does this on average once every 8 years, that it's good to have that professional on your side to deal with all these complexities and problem solving along the way. So pulling up the bar again, so you can kind of see at the start how many things are happening at once in parallel. It does feel like a whirlwind. So I always like to warn my clients, this is going to feel like a whirlwind for a little while. But notice as we carry along with steps along the way, it gets quieter and quieter because there's less and less to do. So it's really common on the home stretch of the purchasing process. Things are really quiet. You're really just focusing on your lender. Sellers focusing on repairs. There's not a lot going on, but you can see at the beginning, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of things happening at once, and a lot of people are calling you at once. And I want you to understand it's a very normal part of the home purchasing process, because a lot of people are trying to help you get this home all at once. So the next 30 days after you accept an offer is going to feel like a whirlwind. It does get quiet near the end, and just remember that your agent's going to help you through this whole process. And really where your responsibility comes in is just making decisions. What is in your best interest? What do you want to do as the milestones carry along in the process? But working together, it's a really successful strategy. Millions of people do it every year. Gosh, it's a really fun process. So don't worry about the complexities, but understand your agent is there for you in handling all of these complexities behind the scenes. You get the keys, you move in, and enjoy your new home.